Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asban Team level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Well, I kept you waiting long enough. It's safe to say that the Daleks are one of the biggest cornerstones in all of Doctor Who. Fans love to compare Dalek stories and debate on which is the best of them all. From Genesis of the Daleks to Parting of the Ways, every top-notch Dalek story has been dissected and analysed endlessly. But then there are the more polarising and Marmite stories like today's subject, The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. This Series 9 opener is very divisive, especially because it isn't really a Dalek story. It's more of a Davros story, seeing the iconic villain's backstory and deepening his relationship with the Doctor. So, nearly 8 years later, how does this two-parter hold up? Does it deserve to be labelled as the worst modern Dalek story, or is it actually a brilliant character piece? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. So grab your closest snake cable thing and get ready for a trip to Skaro, because it's time for a deep dive into The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar.
Tell him the bitch is back.
It's always hard to craft a truly great Doctor Who opening scene that establishes all the core components of an episode, but I feel like Magician's Apprentice does this really well with the opening battle scene on Skaro. It's the perfect showcase of the blend of past and future technologies within the Thousand Year War. After all, Genesis of the Daleks took a lot of inspiration from World War I when it came to the conflict, so I appreciate the consistency here with the biplane shooting lasers, crafting that brilliant retro future vibe for the conflict as the 1,000 Khaleds use up all technology they have left and have to resort to using these cobbled together weapons and equipment from different technological eras. The big empty muddy fields also create that eerie warlike atmosphere of desolation, so punctuated by the clouds of dust and smoke, which further shows the effects the war has had on the landscape, destroying what was probably once a beautiful planet. Part of me does wish the scene could have been a bit more warlike with a few more people involved on both sides to help sell the chaos and destruction, maybe some more craters and artillery, or at least some dead bodies littered around. Genesis of the Daleks had achieved this disorientating chaos a lot more effectively, although I understand that was a lot later on in the war given the age of Davros. This story's take on the idea is still an effective establishing scene though, especially with the hand mines. Despite their punny name, these look very creepy and unsettling. All these muddy hands slowly moving around to reveal eyeballs in their palms. It's an absolutely stellar visual, complemented perfectly with their unique sound design of cracking and sinister whispers. They're such a great concept, and Doctor Whoify the idea of minefields, a terrifying thing to be stuck in the middle of, even if this is their only involvement in the story. Naturally, a kid finds himself in the middle of the hand minefield, and I appreciate that they show us what the creepy hands can actually do. Seriously, it should be standard practice to kill off random side characters like this to showcase the danger of the environment. I'm looking at you, Ghost Monument. I also like how the Doctor's first appearance is a reminder of 12's more odds-based approach to saving lives.
I told you, you have one chance in 1,000. And one is all you ever need.
It's something that was a core part of Series 8, but that series showed it as more of a callous and negative thing for the majority until the true implications were explained to us. However, it's a lot more optimistic in this opening scene as he tries to inspire the young boy. It's more traditionally Doctor-like and a great way of showing a more compassionate and hopeful side of 12, only to have that optimism ripped away when he finds out who this little boy really is.
Davros. My name is Davros.
This is an absolutely fantastic stinger for the cold open, a true bombshell reveal, immediately bringing up the idea of killing evil before it can manifest, although we'll really get into that later on. As far as cold opens go, this is a brilliant way to set up the themes of the story, along with that excellent cliffhanger reveal of Davros, putting the Doctor in such a big dilemma. Moffat wanted to make this opening episode a two-part blockbuster akin to a finale, and I feel like that immediately comes across here as that intro gives way to Colony Sarf journeying through the universe looking for the Doctor, travelling to familiar places like the Maldovarium, the Shadow Proclamation and Khan. He encounters all sorts of monsters and aliens from the show, and it's the kind of interconnected cohesiveness I want more from the show, establishing a more developed ecosystem and a truly shared lived-in universe. Although I'm not sure how I feel about Colony Sarf himself. He's a decent idea, this being made out of loads of snakes, but he often comes across as a bit goofy to me, especially his Segway gliding. Even the Doctor mocks him after his goofy transformation into a snake.
Is that supposed to frighten me? Snake nests in a dress.
He's a villain who is decent in concept, less so in execution.
You will come.
Anyway, after Snake Boy's little trip down Doctor Who memory lane, the episode shifts focus onto Clara rather than the Doctor, who has gone missing. I know the usual lot would probably complain about this being another example of Clara Who, but Moffat explicitly wanted the companion to carry the narrative of the first half of the episode. He wanted to further show how Clara is becoming more and more Doctor-like, consciously embracing her life as a time and space traveller now that she has nothing really anchoring her to Earth after the death of Danny Pink. It's like she wants an excuse to leave her normal life and go on adventures. Clara being the focus of the early stages of this story is a great way to continue developing her character and show how she's becoming more confident but more reckless at the same time. Companion focus stories are no new thing for Doctor Who. Father's Day, Fear Her, Human Nature, Girl Who Waited. These are all episodes where the Doctor takes more of a backseat and the companion becomes the main driving force of the story. So Clara being the focus here isn't anything new. She swans into unit and takes charge just like the Doctor would, swaggering around like she owns the place, making theories and speculating on what's going on with all the planes in the sky. It's a logical progression of this control freak character, especially when she's left to her own devices without the higher authority of the Doctor to guide her. Moffat took clear inspiration from Flatline in the previous series, basing the companion's independence on that very episode, and it really shows.
Come on, what have we got? What do we know?
I really love the misdirection of the stopped planes. We're introduced to this very bizarre mystery of every plane being frozen in midair, something I can only assume is inspired by all those viral videos you see of the whole stopped plane optical illusion. The concept of the planes being stopped in midair could also be the driving force of an entire Doctor Who story by itself, but here it's just a basic narrative function to reintroduce Missy and allow Clara and Unit to do their thing without it taking a lot of time to set up, so I appreciate it. One of Moffat's biggest acts as showrunner was the introduction of the Master's first ever on-screen female incarnation, the second in overall Doctor Who media. She was the big reveal in the Series 8 finale, and Moffat initially planned on waiting a while before bringing her back after her supposed death, although he realised she would be perfect for this blockbuster Series 9 opener. Missy's return is excellent because it's so, well, Missy. It's the exact kind of attention-seeking chaotic malice you expect from this incarnation of the character, sending the planet into a frenzy just to get Unit's attention and taunting them just because she can. I think it's fantastic how Clara reacts to this return. While the rest of Unit are scrambling around out of fear and panic, Clara just stands there with a look of pure hatred. There's almost a cold numbness in the way Clara stares at the woman responsible for taking Danny away from her. It's very brief and subtle visual acting, but it's a brilliant touch to remind you of the history between these two. After all, Clara almost killed Missy at the end of Series 8. It was only the companion's strong relationship with the Doctor that convinced her otherwise. And yes, this is a character conflict wonderfully addressed in this episode.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologise. Make it up to me.
For Clara to see the seemingly dead psychopath would obviously bring back a lot of painful memories, so I really appreciate how they touch upon that and don't act like the whole traumatic Series 8 finale never happened. It's also great how when Clara comes to actually meet Missy, she doesn't allow the evil Time Lord's taunts and mockery to get to her.
How's your boyfriend? Still tremendously dead, I expect.
Clara has learned by this point to stay calm and collected, despite her obvious rage inside, and the music even reflects that kind of Bond villain diplomatic face-off this scene replicates. But it's clear that Missy is in complete control of the whole situation, and she's simply allowing Clara to live because she needs her. Just look at how the evil Time Lord demands 8 snipers and isn't intimidated. In fact, she just wants the challenge. She even uses her captive planes to create some shade just for fun. Missy obviously likes to do a little bit of trolling, but she's still the same cunning and conniving character the Master has always been, so it's great to be reminded of how much control she has over the entire situation. She's not working with Clara and Unit out of the goodness of her heart. She's not doing this because she wants to. She just knows she can use them because they're allies of the Doctor and they're her best chance of finding him. A story like this, which forces Missy to work with the good guys, could run the risk of making her too much of a protagonist, too good. But the episode is quick to shut down any notion of that, as she callously kills 2 security guards just to prove a point to Clara and the viewer themselves.
No, I've not turned good.
Missy and Clara do make a great reluctant team throughout both episodes. From the beginning, Clara still manages to hold her own against Missy, getting the planes released and using her familiarity with the Doctor to track him down. It would be easy to give either Missy or Clara higher priority over one another, and Missy clearly is the more adept one, but I like how they both play a role in finding him. They both use their own skills to achieve that goal, as, reluctant as their partnership is. There's a constant antagonism because they truly hate each other's guts, and I suppose Clara is also a bit jealous of Missy, considering the story makes sure to stress that Missy is the Doctor's closest friend, despite their checkered history. Human companions come and go, but the Master has known the Doctor for almost 2,000 years of his life by this point. The Doctor is desperate to see the good in Missy, to have his friend back and redeem the Master, so I adore the touch that Missy is the one entrusted with a confession dial, because she has much more importance to his life than even Clara does.
See that couple over there? You're the puppy.
One of the biggest examples of Missy and Clara's reluctant alliance is Missy casually pushing Clara down a hole to test how deep it is. She does this because she can. She doesn't care if Clara lives or dies. She just expects the companion to be a helpful tool.
Every miner needs a canary.
Missy has absolutely no fear of Clara. She barely even takes her seriously, not feeling threatened at all. There's even that moment where Missy gives Clara the chance to stab her in the back, but the companion predictably doesn't do it, continuing to give Missy all the leverage and the control in this partnership. So a bit of a hook going into this story is the idea of the Doctor dying, or at least believing he's about to die, leading to him creating a lot of noise in medieval England on his way out. Some people aren't fond of this idea, but I think it's an absolutely fantastic element of the story. I mean, you can't look at this and not at least love it a little bit. It's not even all that unlike the Doctor either. We can't forget the times 10 and 11 knew they were going to their deaths, so went through time and space causing chaos in one last whirlwind farewell tour. I guess it's like the Doctor having the chance to interfere and create the anachronisms he always tries so hard to avoid. It's kind of like a midlife crisis, I suppose. So this scene is absolutely wild and fantastic. It's pretty common trivia by this point, but Peter Capaldi was a punk rock guitarist back in the 80s, so he genuinely knows how to play the guitar, and he was the one who suggested the 12th Doctor also play the guitar throughout Series 9, and it's a nice, fresh characteristic for an incarnation of the Doctor. However, despite all the gallivanting and time breaking, there's still a strong sense of vulnerability and fear within the Doctor. We see this as Clara makes a bit of a joke about him potentially dying, only for there to be this awkward pause before he suddenly hugs her, something he spent multiple episodes in Series 8 specifying that he didn't like doing. Him doing this really shows just how serious the situation is, how genuinely scared the Doctor is at this prospect of meeting with Davros the next day. It's rare to see such vulnerability on display, and I think this simple act of hugging goes a long way in reminding you of the gravity of this entire situation. Because of the stuff with Missy and the tank and the guitar, you kind of forget what is actually awaiting the Doctor. So much happens at the start of Magician's Apprentice that the whole Davros element kind of intentionally slips into the background as you get wrapped up in the Doctor's antics and forget the reckoning to come. However, everything immediately comes crashing back down to Earth when Segway Snake Man makes his return, having finally tracked down the Doctor using Clara and Missy. This scene is just kind of exposition and a narrative function to get them all to Skaro, but I do like the touch of the sonic screwdriver appearing again from the beginning.
The look on your face. What is that? Shame.
It's another way to drive home the interpersonal stakes between the Doctor and Davros, with the reveal that the heroic Time Lord straight up abandoned the child in a very uncharacteristic move. I absolutely adore how Murray Gold's score takes a backseat during the Doctor's goodbye. There's still music there, but it doesn't distract you from Capaldi's performance as he shows the guilt and shame of the Doctor, a figure who strives to save anyone in need except that one scared little boy. Capaldi doesn't need to put this into words, he just shows it in facial expressions and the fact that the Doctor surrenders to Sarth without putting up a fight. He knows what he did was wrong, it betrayed everything he stands for, and that's why he expects to die, because, he believes he should.
I let somebody down when I should have been brave enough, strong enough to do better.
And it's hard to blame the Doctor for feeling so conflicted. It's hard for him to be the Doctor when he's faced with such a classic moral dilemma. Let's put aside the obvious paradoxes for a minute and refer to the classic thought experiment of killing a certain Austrian painter when he was a little baby. It's a concept that has existed for decades, pretty much ever since, World War II started. But the 2000 James Lenman paper, Consequentialism and Cluelessness, really delves into the morality that comes with such a decision. Lenman suggests a situation where a German bandit in one 100 BC raids a village and, out of compassion, spares the only survivor, a pregnant woman named Angie. However, it turns out that Angie is a distant ancestor of Mr. Hilter over here. Lenman therefore draws a direct line of causality back to this incident, meaning that the German bandit also becomes responsible for the millions of Hilter's victims because he ultimately sowed the seeds for that horrible man to exist. Lenman goes on to pose the question of whether the end result, no matter how far down the line, means that the bandit acted wrongly and should have killed the innocent pregnant woman, to save the future. It's a paper that really hones in on the ethical minefield of such a situation. If the Doctor saved Davros as a kid, that technically makes him responsible for all the horrors and massacres at the hands of the Daleks. However, if the Doctor, one of the biggest heroes in the universe, killed Davros, that would make him a child murderer, something that would completely destroy him mentally and emotionally and likely drive him to renounce the title entirely. A scenario teased at the end of the episode with that cliffhanger of the Doctor returning to seemingly kill the young Davros. I suppose it's fitting that the Doctor faced a similar choice in Davros' first ever Doctor Who story, Genesis of the Daleks. In that story, the fourth Doctor was tasked with destroying the Daleks before they were ever created, leading to a similar ethical dilemma and crisis of confidence. Considering that this is, to date, Davros' last chronological Doctor Who appearance on screen, it brings things full circle in a nice way.
Davros made the Daleks. But who made Davros?
Speaking of the Daleks, their involvement in this story is admittedly a bit disappointing. Around halfway through Magician's Apprentice, the Doctor and co are brought to a mysterious space station, although the two Time Lords immediately know there's something wrong with the gravity. I like how Missy's unpredictability adds some tension to this scene. From everything we've been shown of her character, it genuinely wouldn't be unlike her to actually allow herself to get sucked out of an airlock just to kill Clara. I genuinely believe Missy would do something like that, so it does add some stakes to her recklessly opening the airlock when we believe they're in the middle of space. But because Missy is insanely smart, she's proven right that they're not in space, leading to that absolutely fantastic reveal of the planet they're really on.
Scarrow! You brought me to Scarrow!
This scene is put together so incredibly well. Yes, some of the effects and green screening are a bit dodgy, that's to be expected with Doctor Who, but the gradual build up is truly delightful. From the sand on Missy's fingertips to the dilation in her eyes as they adjust, the little touches really make this scene. The music swells up into the bone-chilling dark and endless Dalek night from a stolen Earth, with even Missy, the ultimate villain, stunned in fear at the understanding that they're on Scarrow itself, the planet having been rebuilt somehow. I love this reveal so much, it's the ideal way to give the first part a big climax, immediately making the stakes skyrocket as the trap is sprung and we realise just how much danger all our main characters are really in. I love how the visuals of Scarrow in this story reflect the vision of the comic strips of TV Century 21, which were a huge part of Dalek media, adding a lot of lore to them and introducing all sorts of new types of Daleks and new designs. The main reason Moffat chose the once destroyed planet of the Daleks as the setting for this story was because he wanted to reattempt a gimmick he had previously tried to incorporate into Asylum of the Daleks back in 2012. In that episode, he had wanted to include all sorts of previous Dalek casings from throughout their storied history, but he hadn't really been able to do much with the concept because of the plot, or, lack thereof. However, the prospect of the extended runtime of a two-parter led the writer to believe he could actually get more use out of all these different Daleks this time, although that didn't really happen. Regardless, it's still fantastic to see all these different Daleks together in one place. A delightful historic mismatch of designs and colours. Hell, we even get to see my boy the Special Weapons Dalek again. That always makes things better. It's a great tribute to the history of the villains that we have so many different casings sharing the stage, rather than just those Bronze Time War Daleks. However, as I implied, all the Daleks are kind of wasted in this episode, mainly just hanging around in this hub room. They kind of only exist for the fake out deaths of Missy and Clara, which aren't even that well executed because there's a real lack of the tension the episode seems to aim for. Like, Missy just goes, she just gets yeeted, it's very anticlimactic and half-hearted. The episode doesn't even try to pretend it's a real extermination. Clara's supposed death is better handled with a swell of music, but I definitely feel like Moffat goes overboard with these shock exterminations. We get two main character deaths and the destruction of the TARDIS, so you can already tell none of them are permanent because it happens too quickly and without enough fanfare or gravitas. Hell, even the Doctor barely reacts at the TARDIS being destroyed, so it's not really a dramatic or intense cliffhanger for the episode like it tries to be. However, despite the flaws of this cliffhanger, it does give us that brilliant pseudo-flashback scene as Missy recounts a story about the Doctor surviving impossible odds. First of all, it's an excellent touch for her to not attach it to any Doctor in particular, because it's a situation which, could really apply to almost any of them. They just have those consistent character traits. It's shot really well with those brief glimpses of the 4th and 1st Doctors before she settles on 12 because he's the current one. The music is punchy and action-packed, and it's fun how the stakes keep getting raised as if Missy is like the world's most stubborn and unhelpful dungeon master of all time.
No, he's the Doctor. He fell into a nest of vampire monkeys.
It's a wonderful hypothetical for Missy to craft, putting the Doctor up against these impossible odds and then asking Clara to work out how he must have survived. It's a test of her abilities and intelligence, and it continues to show how Clara is starting to think like the Doctor. She's able to immediately work it out, perfectly encapsulating how close they are and how familiar she is with him. She is able to think and act just like him. Not only is it a way of explaining Missy's survival, but it's also a great chance to further that characterization of Clara herself and feed into the wider hybrid storyline.
We assume we're gonna win.
The apparent death of Clara also leads to some good character work for the Doctor himself, who suddenly finds himself with nothing to lose. I know it's controversial, but I love the moment of the Doctor hijacking Davros's chair, wheeling his way into the hub room and, just mocking the Daleks.
Admit it, you've all had this exact nightmare.
I also like Moffat's little jab at his own inconsistent writing, having the Doctor pull a cup of tea out of thin air and literally just telling us to accept it because he's the Doctor. It doesn't forgive the genuine instances of something like this, but it's at least a funny self-aware moment here. However, despite the comedy, it does also give us that glimpse at a darker Doctor, someone we genuinely could see wiping out the Daleks because he believes his friends and his TARDIS have been destroyed. So he's unchained, there's nothing holding him back now.
Listen to your little heart's beat.
Like Missy says, this is the Doctor without hope, and it's a phenomenal piece of foreshadowing as to the lengths he'll go to try and save Clara or bring her back, which is obviously a big aspect of the overall storyline, especially in the finale.
He'll burn everything. Us too.
Davros's involvement in this story originally could have been very different. Moffat initially wanted a sequel of sorts to Genesis of the Daleks to mark the iconic story's 40th anniversary, and he even tried to convince former showrunner Russell T Davies to write this Davros on trial storyline, although Russell T declined the offer. This naturally led to Moffat settling on the idea of a dynamic confrontation between 12 and Davros, exploring the lingering questions of the Doctor's morality by inverting them and having Davros be the one wondering if he's a good man for his creation of the Daleks.
I need to know, before the end, am I a good man?
The conversations between 12 and Davros are by far the highlights of the story, like the one where they discuss the Doctor's compassion, with Davros even speculating that it will kill the Doctor in the end, something we indeed later see when it comes to the 12th Doctor's regeneration. It's great to see these two fiercely different characters just talking to one another, and finding a bizarre sense of respect and common ground despite their hatred for each other.
I wish, just once, we had been on the same side.
These slower, more philosophical scenes are the reason Moffat wanted more two-parters in Series 9, to benefit from Capaldi's unique take on the Doctor. Rather than hyper-energy and action-packed fight scenes running down corridors, this story focuses on these conversations and character beats, really showing the benefit of slowing the episodes down and expanding their runtime. There's a sense of poignancy as the Doctor and Davros explore their relationship, the begrudging respect directly inspiring Moffat to bring Missy back in the story, because the themes match so well, the pairings were so similar. Arch nemeses forced to acknowledge each other's abilities and achievements no matter how much they hate each other for it. However, it's a shame that these interesting and philosophical interactions are kind of ruined by the story making Davros's deception incredibly clear at multiple points, with him outright declaring that he's going to entrap the Doctor even before all these scenes take place. There's even a shot focusing on colony staff hiding as the Cables, only for the story to expect us all to be shocked when Davros reveals his true motives. I mean, I get that he probably wants the smug ego boost of the Doctor not noticing the obvious bait, but from an audience perspective, it's just kind of weird and unsatisfying. The whole concept of a vengeful Doctor being offered a chance to destroy the Daleks like the Metacrisis Doctor did and become a god would have been a lot more interesting if we didn't know Davros was scheming. We know it's a trap, we can't even slightly believe he's being sincere when he congratulates the Doctor on saving Gallifrey and having a race once more.
A man should have a race, a people and allegiance.
It also overshadows the huge moment of Davros opening his real eyes, something expanded media explained he doesn't do often because of how much pain it causes him, which is why he almost exclusively relies on his artificial eye. The moment has a lot of gravitas because it's the first time we're actually seeing Davros' eyes opening, punctuating the sense of him dying and actually humanizing him in a way. It creates a feeling that everything from previous Davros stories has been stripped away, and now that he's at the end of his life, he can just be honest with himself and reconnect with the innocence of his past. I feel like there's even parallels you can draw to the Killing Joke in this scene, as the two bitter enemies are able to take a moment and simply laugh at a joke together.
You are not a good doctor.
For one brief moment, they can put aside all their differences, all their anger, all their hatred, and just share in this touching moment of common existence, enjoying each other's company without the need to fight each other. I suppose Davros wanting to see one last sunrise also brings up comparisons to Handel's in Time of the Doctor, where Eleven begged his pet robotic head to just last until one more sunrise, only for Handel's to then die seconds before the sun came up. On a narrative level, I imagine 12 still remembers this moment and wants to make sure the same doesn't happen to Davros. He wants to grant the dying scientist that wish of one final sunrise despite everything they've seen and everything they've been through. And sure, it may be a guilt trip, part of the trap to manipulate the Doctor, but it genuinely feels like an emotional moment. The Doctor making this gesture for the child Davros, not the monster he became later on.
I think I owe him a sunrise.
But of course, in a predictable twist, Davros was simply taking advantage of the Doctor's compassion, with the Time Lord sacrificing his you-know-what to use a bit of regeneration energy and allow Davros to use his eyes again, only for the villain to turn the tables and trap the Doctor. I feel like this is such a disappointing return to the status quo, casting doubt on everything Davros said to the Doctor. Yes, the whole scheme was to trick the Doctor into giving Daleks regeneration abilities or something. I personally would have much preferred Davros to actually have been completely innocent, for the Daleks to be the villains in their own way, while Davros simply passes away having shared these touching moments with the Doctor in complete sincerity. Maybe have the Daleks accuse the Doctor of killing their creator or something, to create that more generic story, but instead it just goes down such a predictable and unsatisfying route. Having the twist be that Davros was actually dying and legitimately wanted to spend his last moments with the Doctor for some sense of absolution would create a very profound feeling and change the usual formula up. The Doctor, much like ourselves, would be expecting some kind of evil plan the whole time, only for the subversion to be that there isn't one. That would have been so much more effective in my eyes, and it's baffling that they didn't do this, considering these kinds of fake out villains are such a staple of the Capaldi era. You still could have the Daleks creating a sense of threat during and after Davros' death to keep things feeling normal, but to have Davros still be the big bad villain is a huge misstep and reverts everything to the status quo rather than actually taking a bold new step with the character. The Daleks get given their Time Lord powers and they're immediately happy about it. I don't quite understand how Moffat expected this plot development to make sense, because multiple episodes in the past have shown how much the Daleks hate the idea of even a slight genetic impurity. It's to the extent that they would kill themselves just for having a tiny bit of humanity inside them. Obviously the Daleks in the sewers go on the attack, but the story puts this down to general anger and resentment rather than a battle regarding purity. A purity-based fight would have been a lot more fitting, like in Revolution of the Daleks, where the two factions fight over their, you guessed it, purity. And it would also create a sense of irony that Davros attempts to make the Daleks better by hybridizing them, only for his past insistence on purity to result in their destruction. But instead, we just get angry sewage. It doesn't really make sense, and also it's a bit goofy to have the Daleks defeated by a literal poop explosion. The idea of a Dalek sewer is pretty stupid, I won't even pretend otherwise. It's up there with a parliament as a very un-Dalek Moffat idea. Obviously Daleks can die, we've seen that firsthand multiple times in the show, so it's weird for this story to introduce the idea that they're somehow genetically engineered to survive no matter what. It's a bit unnecessary in my opinion, and it feels like a plot contrivance. Regardless of the obvious physiological problems, I absolutely adore the idea of putting Clara inside a Dalek. It very much serves as a mirror to Oswin Oswald from Asylum, even down to the difference between what she wants to say and what the Dalek actually says.
Doctor, no! I'm not dead, I'm in here! Can you hear me?
I am a Dalek.
It's a great parallel to that earlier story, the aspect of her identity being ripped away and her being trapped in this hell, but it also adds to Missy's brand of evil, tricking Clara into this Dalek casing and initially trying to sell her out to the other Daleks, before later trying to get the Doctor to kill her himself. This scene is absolutely incredible, a tragic and bittersweet arrangement of Clara's leitmotif playing as she begs the Doctor to recognise her, all her words being twisted and used against her as the programming overrides her. Yes, I'm aware that it shouldn't need to be hardwired into the Daleks that they can't can't say good things. Because they're genetically created to hate anything anyway, it shouldn't have to be a mechanical thing. On a lore level, this scene doesn't make much sense. I mean, Moffat does this whole thing about how Daleks shouldn't know how to say the word mercy, but that literally happened all the way back in his first finale as showrunner.
Mercy!
Say it again.
Mercy!
So that whole aspect of this two-parter immediately falls flat. But on a character level, the scene is phenomenal and heartbreaking. Clara driven to tears as her platonic soulmate is almost driven to kill her. This is by far one of Missy's most evil moments as a character, manipulating both characters just because she can. It's a strong reminder that she's nowhere close to being a good person.
Kill it, Doctor. They're all gonna die anyway.
Indulge yourself, go on.
Much like the Series 8 finale, it's Missy trying to make the Doctor like her. She wants to bring him down to her level and, tempt him down this dark path. And I truly adore the rage in Capaldi's delivery when he discovers this deception.
Missy, run.
It's not hard to imagine the fury going through his mind at this moment. He's always tried his best to see the good in the Master, but like I said, this is one of her most monstrous and evil moments yet. All for essentially no reason, it's just because she can. The Doctor gives her this warning to run for her own protection, because he doesn't know if he's able to have the same restraint this time. In Death in Heaven he hesitated, but this time the emotions are a lot more raw, so he could very easily just shoot her then and there. I do like how Missy gets a bit of an Italian Job ending, where she's trapped with no way out and suddenly comes up with an idea we never actually get to see. It's a great way of sparking the imagination as to how she survived, and a nice nod to the Master's ability to somehow always get out of trouble off screen.
You know what? I've just had a very clever idea.
I'm not a huge fan of how the Doctor and Clara escape. They run back to the Dalek hub and he just uses his new sonic sunglasses to magic the TARDIS back for them to easily escape. It's such a cop-out ending. I don't necessarily mind the sunglasses themselves. They were partly Capaldi's own idea because he and Moffat didn't want 12 to behave as a static character, but it's the use of them that annoys me. The Sonics should never be used like this, as a get out of jail free card to help Moffat write himself out of the corner he put himself in by seemingly destroying the TARDIS. There's nothing to really be gained by having this happen, it's all style, no substance, making things way too convenient for the Doctor. It's not really a satisfying escape. And then the story ends with the resolution of that big cliffhanger at the end of part 1, having the Doctor actually destroying the hand mines rather than Davros, therefore teaching the Daleks mercy or something.
So long as there's mercy.
Regardless of the obvious paradox of these events changing and removing the reasons for the story to take place to begin with, it's a nice resolution, showing that the Doctor's compassion overrides his hatred for Davros and the Daleks. He doesn't care about the long-term consequences, he doesn't care if it makes him responsible for all those future events. He just wants to save a scared little boy, because that's what the Doctor would do. It's hard to know where to begin with summarising and grading The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. There's so much going on in these two episodes, which I guess was the point, since Moffat wanted that finale feeling in the premiere. It definitely achieves that blockbuster atmosphere, but that's also a big downside for it, almost making it feel like an omnibus edit of a classic Who serial. Think about it, you'd have an episode about the planes being frozen, an episode of Clara and Missy trying to find the Doctor, an episode revealing they're on Skaro, then an episode of Clara seemingly dying, then an episode in the sewers. You get the gist. There are so many mini stories in this premiere that feel disjointed, taking place in 2 long 45-minute episodes, which definitely affects things negatively. That being said, there is still a lot to enjoy about the story. The scenes between Peter Capaldi and Julian Bleach are particular standouts, providing a lot of interesting character elements to Davros, even if it does unfortunately stick to the status quo of him being a cackling villain. Clara and Missy have a great side story as they reluctantly work together, developing both their characters in fun and interesting ways. It's a beautifully visualised story with excellent directing and a good score by Murray Gold, but the writing really lets it down with too many plot holes, inconsistencies, and weird quirks that take you out of it. Therefore, I would reluctantly give The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar a very low B rank, only narrowly avoiding that C because of the stuff with 12 and Davros, exploring ethical dilemmas and philosophical ideas in a fantastic way. I know a B is still generous, but it mainly only trips up when it comes to the Daleks themselves and Davros' plan. It could have easily made some slight changes and improved massively in that regard. Regardless, I would say it's a solid opener that introduces a lot of the core themes and narrative beats of Series 9, so it does succeed to that extent. We'll just have to ignore the literal poopy ending. But what do you think? Make sure to let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in, like a billion years for the next review. Thanks for watching, bye bye. And a special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Diamond level patron, Glenna Clark, my Platinum level patrons, Maximilian Foreman and Nick's Games, and all my Gold level patrons, Boots, Calvin, Daniel Shilato, Francois AK Line Vortex, Herna Verzog, Robert Hock, and Tom Azar. Thank you so much for your support.